It's only 30 years of Alliance supporting the leagues, and we're not done yet. Only the leagues, only the Alliance leagues.
Well, the 2022 season is now properly up and running, with the National Hurling League getting underway over the weekend. And some interesting results too. All-Ireland champions Limerick, who many thought would romp to another league triumph, going down by 3 points in Wexford Park and only scoring 11 points themselves. So that's one of the interesting talking points we'll be touching on with John Milan a little later in the show. But first, we will have Ciarán Whelan on in a couple of minutes to discuss the Alliance Football League, Michael. And there's probably that game in Tralee on Saturday night, which was the big one, Dublin Kerry. What did you make of that? Obviously, a very one-sided game for most of it.
Yeah, absolutely horrendous conditions, and I'm sure Kieran is he's probably still drying off after he got absolutely got destroyed the other night. But there was a great atmosphere to it, and obviously a massive crowd came into Tralee, as they always do when the Dubs come to town. But you know, pardon the pun, it was probably a bit of a damn squib in the second half, in the sense that Kerry were in complete control, and it's just so surprising how it looks like at the moment, anyway, that the wheels are coming off in Dublin. That remains to be seen, and I'm sure they'll go about their business and try and turn it around. But that's the great intrigue and the speculation, I suppose, over the next while. Is this has this great Dublin team come to an end, or will this just be a small little roadblock along the way where we'll be saying in 4 or 5 months' time, geez, remember when Dublin went down to Tralee and were awful, and all of a sudden they've got silverware in their hands again 5 or 6 months' time?
Yeah, and just I suppose a word on, like, now that we have the Football League back, the Alliance Hurling League is back as well. Like, it really just feels like the season is up and running properly with the crowds back as well, the atmosphere you referred to. It's great to be able to come in on the Monday morning and, reflect on what's kind of been like a normal GA weekend that we would have been used to from all the other years. Yeah,
100%. And just to be able to chat to people that were at the various grounds around the country and get what the vibe was like in there. And the guy was in Leopardstown yesterday. There's 12,000 people there at the races. Like, there was the guts of 12,000 people down in Tralee on Saturday night, and the conditions were horrendous. People don't care. The appetite there for it is huge. And I suppose it's great to be waking up on the Monday morning, like, just looking and seeing there's so many different stories everywhere you look. Just one story I do want to bring up is Naas beating Kilmiley the other night in the All-Ireland Intermediate Club Final. Tom Mullally was their manager. First time, obviously, a Kildare team have won at that level. Then Tom was over Carlow yesterday, had to make the long spin up to Down, and I believe he actually got sent off yesterday, and they were beaten by a point. So a fairly tough weekend for him. But there's the merger of the leagues and even the end of the club season, and we'll have Ballygunner and Ballyhale obviously next weekend. There's probably never going to be a busier time of the year than right now. There's so many games on, and it's just great. It's great. You'd need eyes in your back of your head to keep an eye on them all, but it's brilliant.
Yeah, well, we're going to kick off with football on the Tyrone podcast in association with Alliance. We're delighted to welcome Ciarán Whelan back to the show. Ciarán, how are you?
Good, Will. Not too bad.
Yeah, good to have you back. You finally dried off from Saturday night. Did you and Pascal flip a coin for the one umbrella? You were very hard done by there.
Yeah, well, I never took a drenching, like it, being honest with you, but I had to give the old man the umbrella. Do you know what I mean? He being an old age pensioner and that, do you know what I mean? I wouldn't like to see him out in the rain. So, I took the hit on Saturday night, and I tell you, it was a bloody bad one, because I'm only drying out now, I reckon. You know what I mean? But anyway, so listen, could have been worse. Could have been in worse places, I think.
Yeah, well, I think you're drenching during the halftime period kind of summed up, I think, where Dublin were probably at themselves, going into the break 114 to 4 points down. I think it was the start of the Earwigs game was the last time they had such a large halftime deficit. They rallied a bit in the second half, but it was long over by then. From a Dublin perspective, Ciarán, what's kind of the chief amongst your concerns now after seeing them the last 2 weekends?
Well, thanks for bringing up the start of the Airwigs as well. That's another dig, Will. You know what I mean, Cheney?
Happy Monday morning, Ciarán.
Back with a bang. No, yeah. Listen, it was disappointing. Will, it was in some ways it was a strange type of game, in that you felt that the first quarter Dublin would have been reasonably happy, even though Kerry had missed a few chances, particularly in the first 10 minutes, and you're thinking, yeah, it's kind of 6-4, and it definitely was a 6-7 point win. You know what I mean? There's no doubt about it. And then the fortuitous goal, the wrong black card, and then the game just slipped away from them very, very quickly. And I suppose, looking at it from a couple of perspectives, the disappointing thing within that period was that I think Dublin in previous days would have really slowed the game down. They would have realised they were under the cosh of 14 men. There was a wind. They would have made it difficult, maybe Kerry defensively. One of the, and I'm talking probably not just even that period, probably the whole game, in that, you know, going into the game on Saturday night, you're coming down and you're thinking, you're looking at what Rian O'Neill done to them in Croke Park in terms of defensively when they gave them that space last Saturday week. And you're coming up against Kerry, probably the best forward line in the country, pound for pound, where you have Sean O'Shea, you have Geaney inside, you have Clifford, you have Paddy Clifford pulling the strings, and then you have the likes of Darren Moynihan, who's much more direct. And you're coming into that game, and there's a gale force wind, and it's lashing rain, and you're thinking, you know, Dublin are depleted, a lot of injuries, a lot of guys not there, Kerry are full strength, and you're kind of looking, you know, to say, well, you know, wet night, will Dublin just make this difficult? And you're looking for some sort of structure, and particularly some sort of structure in defence, because Kerry are the type of team that thrive on space, you know, and even go back to last year's All-Ireland final, you know, where Tyrone made it very difficult for them, and they walked Kerry in, or semi-final, where they walked Kerry into the traps. They used the sideline when Kerry came into the scoring zone, they closed down the space. And you kind of were looking for Dublin to have some sort of defensive structure. And that just wasn't there for the second week in a row. And that, to me, is probably the most disappointing thing. Yes, there's issues even going forward. And there was, you know, we saw as the game went on, there was maybe discipline issues and aimless kicking and stuff like that. But I really thought Dublin would have been set up with a little bit more structure defensively going into the game. And then particularly in that 15-minute period where Kerry just ate them. There was no effort to kind of stem the flow, the tide of that period, and it just meant Kerry could control the game. And even Kerry came out in the second half, you know, even when Jack Barry had the black card and you know, they're down a man, you know, yes, they were in control of the game, they were 13 points up, but, you know, Tadhg already sat in front of the Dublin inside line. Dublin didn't look like creating a goal opportunity in that second half. So yeah, that was it's disappointing in terms of, yes, Dublin are very depleted, but just lacking that bit of structure and tactical setup that would have been there in the past.
Yeah, Michael, like, what's your view on that period when the game turned in the second quarter? Because as Kieran said, you know, at 6 points to 4, Dublin had manufactured a couple of good goal chances. You know, even the Lorcan O'Dell hand pass to Dean Rock, that was one in the past. They probably would have finished it off. So, you know, they were in a pretty good place considering the conditions. But then the 1-8 to no score period, you know, was just an obliteration. Well, like, what did you make of that kind of time of the game?
Yeah, kind of just similar to what Kieran says there. They were in the game. You're looking at go in 5 or 6 down. You have a great chance of kicking a couple of early scores in the second half, keeping yourself in the game. The game just completely went away from them in that time. Like, with the best will in the world, even if it turned into an absolute gale blowing in their favour in the second half, they were always going to struggle to bridge a kind of a 13-point gap. And as Kieran said there, just something that you wouldn't have seen for the guts of, I suppose, since Donegal beat them. There would always be someone just minding that area around the D, just not even necessarily been on the ball a lot, but just been there, cutting off an angled kick, cutting off a ball coming in. And you know what David Clifford's going to do if he gets any type of space. I'm just surprised that Dublin didn't pack their defence a bit more, make Kerry shoot from 45 yards, make them do what Kerry made Dublin do in the second half. Dublin didn't look particularly comfortable shooting from some of the areas that they had to shoot from. There were lower percentage shots. Sean Bugler took on one in the second half that just stands out in my mind. It was a lower percentage shot, well outside the D, about 40 yards out. Whereas Dublin nearly, not that they allowed Kerry, but they definitely allowed Kerry take on shots and take on scoring chances from areas that they would fancy themselves scoring from. So I just thought that was strange. And we always talked about under Jim Gavin the game smarts, you know, really been really smart in possession, particularly if they're playing against the breeze, playing down the clock a small bit. Even the Larkin O'Dell chances you mentioned there, like, he didn't even give Dean Rock a chance to do the volleyball finish. You know, it was that far away from him. Just some very, very strange things there. It was Brian Howard had a free in the first half at one stage, and they were trying to force things to happen. He lobbed the ball into like an ambulance area, you'd call it nearly. And the exact same thing happened in the second half with Brian Fenton lobbing in a free there. It was over a lad's head. It was a really low percentage play. And I think that's probably the most surprising thing, that, you know, what we would have characterised, you know, that great Dublin team as, you know, being so efficient in possession, so efficient in front of the goal, so efficient in the shots that they were taking. that just seemed to be absent last Saturday night, and it was absent the Saturday night before that as well, which is just really surprising. And I don't know if that points at something a little deeper than just, you know, a systems failure. Well, it's hard to know. It's hard to believe that it's a very happy camp at the moment, just with the amount of really on Dublin-like things that are happening during games. And it's going to be fascinating now to see over the next couple of weeks whether they can turn it around or not. But, you know, that was poor the other night. There's no point in saying any different.
But even on that, Michael, like one of the aspects, and I know Dublin over the last couple of years would always, if there's someone out of the play, they'd be dropping into that pocket and stuff like that. And they didn't in previous years. Keane O'Sullivan probably played a more defined sweeper role, or Johnny Cooper, where they have somebody back there full time. But we've seen different people. It kind of evolved over a period of time. But even when, like, the opposition are having set plays now. You know, you look at the one couple of the Armagh scores last week came from Armagh's having free kicks where the game is being slowed down, where there's an opportunity to close down that space. The other example the other night was the sideline ball. Now, it was marginal which way it went. That doesn't really matter, I suppose, in the overall context. What really matters is that ball was popped into space where normally, where there's a set play where you have that 3-4 seconds, you would have somebody in that pocket cutting off that kick, cutting down that option and forcing Kerry to take a shorter option. If you're playing Kerry, that's what you want to do. You don't want to give them space. You don't want to give them time. You want to slow down their momentum because they're brilliant kick passers. And to their credit, you know, in the conditions the other night, their ball handling and their first touch was top drawer, I have to say. It really was, because it stuck, and their interchange play in the forward line was brilliant. And Dublin, as I said, just done nothing to stem that flow.
Just on that, Ciarán, as well, I was blown away by the fact that even on the Dublin kickouts in the first half, when you really do want to do everything you can to hold on to possession, even on long kickout, that they seem to be outnumbered even on a breaking ball off Evan Comfort's kick out, which I was just really surprised by. They had a fair idea where the ball was going, and there was maybe, you know, 6 Kerry to 4 Dublin. And if Kerry get their hands on the ball then, you know, with the breeze in particular, I was just surprised that they weren't even flooding that kind of breaking ball area there. But there was just a lot of very kind of strange happenings the other night.
Yeah, Kieran, and what did you make of Michael's point about the amount of un-Dublin-like kind of part of the play? You know, some of the aimless kicking you referred to, some of the poor choices on frees, the kind of lack of that composure that was the hallmark of the Jim Gavin era. Like, do you think that walked out the door a little bit when Jim Gavin left too? You know, what do you make of that specific element of it?
I think, you know, the last 2 weeks we've seen Dublin play kind of chasing a game, where they're so used to controlling a game, and they've had to chase down a game, and it's led to kind of a lot of panic type football, which, you know, people are kind of saying, well, it's un-Dublin. Like, I think you also have to put into maybe context, maybe the team selection and the amount of guys that were kind of maybe missing the other night. You know what I mean? I think you have to take that in the context. You know, James McCarthy obviously out, Con O'Callaghan out, Mick Fitzsimon's not there. If Johnny Cooper had been there in the defence, he probably would have had the smarts to maybe pull guys into various positions and close down options. You know, Merchant wasn't there, Cormac Costello wasn't there, so like there was significant. They were very, very depleted. And I think, well, when you bring in new players and like after last year, Desi Farrell has to find new players. He has to. We need that depth. He has to find 3 or 4 players that he wants to trust, and whether they're actually there or not is still questionable. There's no one really putting a hand up to say, yeah, I'm ready to come into this team and nail down a place. Maybe Lee Gannon has been probably the only one that's come in. There's something a bit about him, but again, he was left kind of badly exposed at times with Davy Byrne. So I think you have to consider the team that's on the field. But, you know, as I said from the outset, there is some kind of traits in terms of maybe that lack of structure, that bit of panic, like the wild tackling, particularly in the last 10, 15 minutes, kind of indisciplined tackling, the body language, like a lot of things kind of, you know, indicating that they're finding this period tough. And as I said on Sunday night or Saturday night, that, you know, a lot of the leaders within that group have never had to deal with defeat. You know, most of them are practically unbeaten when it comes to championship football. So this is a challenging time for them. And they have to, I suppose, find that hunger and desire in there to get back to the top and bring those young players with them. So because they've had so much success, it's a different challenge for this group now. So you're hoping that they can get a 2-week break now, get a few players back, and certainly in the next couple of games, you'd be looking to see, is there that aspect of structure there? Is the decision making better? Is the movement better? Because it can't continue in the vein, I suppose, the last 2 weeks.
And next up, I think, is Mayo and Croke Park under lights on a Saturday night.
Yeah. And Mayo, listen, Mayo will be smelling blood, no doubt about it. And, credit where credit is due to Mayo. I watched them last week in their first half. They were really, really poor, and you were kind of going, well, what sort of Mayo is going to come into this league? But they were very, very good in the second half when they orchestrated that high press. They dug out a massive victory yesterday. Okay, granted, they've had injuries, with Almond Loughlin, Tommy Conroy. They've had a lot of setbacks, which is bad luck for them. But they're going to arrive in Croke Park in 2 weeks' time and really aggressively go after Dublin, because Horan will definitely have targeted that game to make a statement.
Yeah, Michael, as Kieran mentioned, it's a great opportunity for Mayo to really, after beating them for the first time in the championship in a long time last summer, to kind of reinforce that maybe new power shift in their relationship by going to Croke Park and really hitting Dublin when they're down.
Yeah, no, definitely. And as Kieran said there, it was a bad first half against Donegal. They bounced back, got a good result yesterday, especially with Owen McLaughlin going off. I suppose that his injury is another worry, with Tommy Conroy out for the year, having suffered a cruciate during the week as well. And Owen McLaughlin have been flying for UL in the Sigerson too, so he's out for the foreseeable now as well, which is going to be a big loss. Hopefully Killian O'Connor will be back over the coming weeks, but they'll definitely will sense blood. Like Dublin have orchestrated so much pain on Mayo for the guts of the last decade, and they will sense an opportunity. Like, when was the last time, in the last God knows how long, that Mayo would have beaten Dublin in back-to-back games, league and championship? I can't imagine when that would have been. Possibly maybe around 2012. So they will definitely sense blood. Just quickly moving back, I think it's probably right on the Dublin Kerry result that the focus is probably more on Dublin and less on Kerry, because as Ciarán said there, when Kerry were good, they were good the other night, but that's essentially, their championship 15. Give or take, one or two guys coming back, and maybe Stefan Ockenbar and a couple others coming back in. Let's give or take their championship team coming up against, a Dublin team, probably 8 to 9 maybe championship starters, and missing, a couple of their real kind of leaders all over the pitch. So you have to, Kerry were good, particularly in that second quarter. Kerry kicked a point in the second half. Fair enough against a gale force breeze, but they kicked the point. I think Paul Geaney had a goal chance probably around the 55th minute, and they hardly created a scoring chance thereafter. So when they were good, but they still have plenty of worries as well. I think from their point of view, they would be happy that defensively, at least they didn't give Dublin, a load of scoring chances to get back in the game. Dublin never really looked like bridging that gap, and Kerry didn't offer them the opportunities, which is encouraging for them. But they have plenty of their own kind of issues to iron out over the next while as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they go over the next couple of weeks as well. Kieran, one of the other big results of the weekend, Armagh 2-14, Tyrone 14, I suppose overshadowed a bit by the mad scenes and injuries.
Overshadowed completely.
Yeah, a bit maybe. Yeah, it's pretty generous. 4 red cards to Tyrone, to some key men: Padraig Campsey, McGeary, Peter Hart among them. Looking at the video of the action, it didn't necessarily jump out to be 4 or 5 red cards. Like, by that letter of the law, Meath Mayo 96 would have probably had 30 red cards. They would have
been in prison. Meath Mayo 96, I'd say. Compared to that yesterday.
Yeah, but what did you make of that? Like, do you expect there could be some? There'll definitely be some appeals. I think both managers were saying that afterwards.
Yeah, I think it surprised everybody. I think nobody saw it coming, being honest with you. Listen, it was an instant. There was a lot of pushing and shoving and dragging people to the ground. But I think obviously David Goff is, and he's set down a marker for the year. And I'm sure the GA are probably delighted this morning. He stood back and he's obviously identified, obviously contributing to Melee, but it certainly seems to the guys that, have used this kind of choke tackle or whatever, a headlock and pulling guys to the ground, which can be quite dangerous. But he obviously, as he said, he stood back, he identified them. And I think traditionally, in situations like that, most lads know when you get involved in something like that, if you raise your hand or you strike, you're going to be gone. And you see a lot of pushing and shoving and dragging and stuff in loads of games. But obviously David Goff has identified this as a step too far in that it's a dangerous situation to pull somebody to ground, a headlock, or somebody doesn't see it coming from behind or whatever. And that's obviously where he's identified the red card offences. So it definitely lays down a marker for the year and going forward. Would other referees have implemented the same decision? Possibly not. I wouldn't have thought so. So, again, it comes back to that consistency. If that was to happen again, will we get the same outcomes? You know what I mean? So, and the other question is, if it happened in the first 10 minutes, would we have seen 4 red cards? Or if that happened in an All-Ireland semi-final, or a provincial final, that sort of way. So I think from a refereeing perspective, it always comes back to consistency. Technically, he was within his rights to issue those black card or red cards. And he's laid down a strong marker to any teams out there to say, listen, lads, if you want to get involved in that silly stuff and start pulling lads and dragging lads to the ground, you run the risk of being on the sideline. So, yeah, it shocked everybody, I think,
Just on that, Will, I wasn't aware of any edict, just from even chatting a couple of referees, any edict that had been passed down to be really honing in on this area player, trying to cut down on it. So it does look like David Goff has set a bit of a precedent, but it's only a precedent if the appeals process are kind of brushed aside. If the 4 Tyrone lads win their appeals and Armagh win their appeal as well, it's totally redundant again. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And obviously, I think Kieran McEntee said that there's going to be a lot of solicitors busy over the next while, and obviously Fergal Logan is going to be particularly busy over the next while. So it's going to be really interesting to see kind of what happens next. From a Tyrone point of view, they're beaten in their first 2 games. They could potentially be down 4 players, including their captain and the footballer of the year, and Peter Hart and Michael McKernan as well. So I'm sure they will go gung ho to try and get them back. But that will have an effect if they are overturned. That'll have a massive effect on whether this kind of play is going to be that dangerous play is going to be implemented by referees for the rest of the year.
It will be interesting to see, because even when you look at the video that we saw last night, it's very hard, even watching us, to identify who does what, when they do it, and what happens. And, the charges that are going to be brought forward to these guys is, bringing the game into distribution, contributing to melee between whatever minute and another minute. And it's up then to the GA to demonstrate and show that person bringing the game into distribute. Because listen, I've been there at the Battle of Omagh. I know exactly the process they're going to go through. So yeah, it's going to be that no stone will be left unturned. I think Fergal Logan came straight out and said, we're going to appeal this, and they'll do everything to get off. And as Michael said, that's going to be the key going forward. If this decision stands and suspensions are accepted, then we will certainly send out a strong message to everyone going, we run the risk of getting that red card.
Yeah, Kieran, from an Armagh perspective, as I said, it does overshadow. Second week in a row, they put up a decent score: 2-15 against Dublin, 2-14 against Tyrone, 2 very impressive victories. How impressed have you been with how they started the year?
Yeah, really impressed, Will, being honest with you. They've a fair bit of work done, but I think they've taken huge learnings from the Monaghan game last year, where they were very, very open, and they've put a very solid defensive structure in. They're very well conditioned and fit for this time of year. They're putting a lot of energy into it. Kieran McEntee said himself, he's well aware it's only February, but they look very, very organised and very, very comfortable in what they're trying to do. And we saw against Dublin last week, their counter-attacking game was very good. Slightly different yesterday. They had to hold on to it, but they still moved the ball very, very quickly and put themselves in a great position to win the game. May have failed a little bit more in the second half, which really got Tyrone back into it. But they will be extremely happy. I sat in Croke Park last week, a good few Armagh people around me, and I heard them saying, this is the best performance they'd ever seen from Armagh. So they're in a good stead, in the McEntee regime. From a Tyrone perspective, I was on holidays over Christmas, and I bumped into 1 or 2 of them on their team holiday. And, Tyrone certainly enjoyed their period of celebration last year. They're probably 6 weeks, 7 weeks behind other teams, maybe, in terms of their preparation for this year. So, they're going to get better. They were way off in the first half yesterday, but, they'll still do enough to hang on. And, Tyrone's focus is definitely on the summer. So I wouldn't be reading in too much to the Tyrone performance at this time of the year, at this point yet.
And the final game in Division 1, Michael, Donegal, pretty straightforward victory over Kildare. injury concern to Michael Murphy, and we know last year how that ended up derailing them probably in some ways as the season went on. But what did you make of that game?
Well, I'd definitely imagine Declan Bonner be erring on the side of caution, hugely erring on the side of caution with Michael Murphy, and he won't be coming back into the fray until he's back 100% fit. But the fact that he went off pretty early in the game, and that they were still able to find a way to win a game comfortably enough. And someone who we talked about last week, who maybe, he's been around a long time, but maybe hasn't hit the heights in recent seasons that we maybe would have thought, is Paddy McBrearty. And he was key for them yesterday. And I think it's psychologically, it's a big boost for them to win a game like that with Murphy gone off the field nice and early, because the narrative would be that they struggle in games without him, that he's the spiritual leader anywhere between 8 and 14 on the team, and he just drifts around there and kind of orchestrates things. So I think it's important for them to get a result there, particularly because Jimmy Hyland bagged a goal nearly straight after he went off injured. So you're thinking maybe the tide could turn in Kildare's favour here. So I think it's important for them to win in adversity there, especially after blowing a lead like they did the first week against Mayo.
Yeah, I'll give you the last word in Division 1 then, Ciarán. What's your take on Donegal at the moment? You mentioned the Mayo game earlier and how poor Mayo were in the first half, but Donegal in the second half then completely faded. And we've seen that happen to them a couple of times under Declan Bonner, getting their first victory of the campaign now. Where do you put them in the kind of rankings?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Well, being honest with you, I've always thought the last 2 or 3 years I would have been highly complimentary of them, and I thought they had excellent footballers, and their range of scores, their ability to take scores from distance, their interchange play. They probably become very much an attacking unit. I thought they were pretty poor defensively, which was a question mark. But I think the challenge for them at the moment now is more psychological, that they weren't, last week when Mayo pushed up on them and squeezed them, made them look very, very average. And I think the key for me is, if you're playing against Donegal, you can't give them that possession around the middle, because they will make hay with it. You know what I mean? So I think, there's no doubt about it, Declan Bonner is under a bit of pressure to deliver something up there. And yesterday's victory against Kildare would be, is a good boost for them. They've got 3 points now out of 4. They'd be very, very happy with the start of the league. So it's going to be interesting to see when they come with a few bigger tests later in the year. So I'd be reserving judgment on them just yet, because in previous years I thought they were in a really good place and they blew up. So they're still work in progress, I think.
Great stuff, Ciarán. Thanks so much for joining us.
No problem, lads.
And just before we welcome John Milan onto the Tyrone to discuss the Alliance Hurling League kickoff over the weekend, Michael, we might just quickly spin through some of the lower divisions, some interesting results. Division 2, Meath, compounding last weekend's disappointing defeat to Galway with another poor outing against Roscommon. Annie McEntee sent to the stands at the end as well. They haven't made a good start to the year, have they?
No, definitely not. And his son James was sent off, I think, but just before that, and then he ended up getting sent to the stands as well. Not particularly good. I think it was the 47th minute before they kicked a point from play in that game, which is not good. And it's, pointing back to the week before against Galway, it was 45 minutes before they even got a score on the clock. So definitely a bit worrying for Meath, especially with the mood music in Meath over the winter as well. They have to be really, really careful here. You're teetering on the Park Talton or the Talton Games category here. If you're, two more bad results and they're in trouble, and it could be they might leave themselves too much of a mountain to climb.
Yeah, as Donegal Boyle, I think, said something today, in his piece about the match, you could have the Tailteann Cup on in Park Tailteann if Meath aren't careful for later in the year. Other results in Division 2, Galway and Derry continuing their 100% start along with Roscommon. Already the 3 of those teams look to be pulling away from the rest.
Yeah, good result from Roscommon, especially missing a big contingent from Pearses and St. Follocks as well there. So that's a big result for them. Clare and Cork was a decent game on Saturday evening as well, and Cork were probably lucky to come away with a point, and I'd say they'd be happy to. Clare are still there with 3 points from 2 games as well, as consistent as ever. Kind of feared for Offaly in Division 2 this year, and it kind of looks like that's going to materialise. Derry really had them at arm's length the other night. And then just even going down to Division 3, I know we talk about the Limerick hurlers the whole time, and we'll definitely be talking about them a bit more with John. But Billy Lee has really turned around the Limerick footballers. 2 wins from 2. Good win against Antrim the other night. Kind of a couple of goals early kind of paved the way. But they're looking like they're going to stay in Division 3, and they potentially could push for Division 2. And that's from, been a mid-table Division 4 side for a couple of years at the start of Billy's reign, and he's really, really turned things around. And funnily enough, Paul Kinnerk, who's obviously coach with the hurlers, he's basically running their football academy, their underage academy, the fruits of which we're going to start seeing over the next couple of years. And I've always said maybe there's a chance that he'll end up in inter-county football, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he did. And that's a fascinating prospect. But they're definitely leaving themselves in a really good position whenever over the next couple of years. The other two results that stood out in Division 4 as well. Sligo absolutely routed Carlow. I can't remember the last time we saw 28 points kicked in a football game, 28 points to 5. Really, really worrying from a Carlow point of view. We only had one score. Colm Hulton was their only scorer. And the other result was London making it back-to-back wins in Division 4. Having not played competitive football for about 23 months, to win their first two games is huge. And even Watford even backed up their result against Tipperary the first week by they were only beating a point in Ruislip yesterday. And then even in Division 4 as well, probably the biggest upset of the weekend was Leitrim beating Tipperary by 8 points. Tipperary, who won Munster.
In Tipperary as well.
Yeah, Tipperary, who won Munster in November of 2020. We're looking at 16 months later, Michael Quinlivan is gone and a few more elder statesmen are gone, and they're struggling. And for Andy Moran, that's a huge win. First competitive win, I think, a massive win for him.
Well, it's time to turn our attention to hurling on the Throw-In podcast in association with Alliance. We'd like to have John Milan with us as always. John, how are you?
How are you going, Will? Not too bad.
Yeah, good, thanks. An interesting opening weekend in the Alliance Leagues. I guess we're going to have to start with Wexford Park. Limerick going down 111 to Wexford. I don't think anyone really predicted that. Dara Egan getting his league campaign off to a very good start with Wexford. What did you make of that game? Like, such a low score even from Limerick to churn out, given the quality of players they have. I know they were missing some key guys, but they still had a very strong team.
Yeah, they did. And look, I suppose, massive kudos to Wexford in how they responded after that defeat to Dublin. I was sitting at home on the couch and I was really looking forward to seeing how they'd react after that Dublin defeat. And, you got to give them great credit the way they responded. I thought they were excellent. They really manned up to Limerick, took them on in all areas. And as we've seen in the past, Wexford Park, it's a difficult venue to go to and pick up a result. And to hold Limerick, the All-Ireland champions, to 11 points, was incredible, and it was a great day's work for Wexford.
Yeah, Michael, is one of the kind of takeaways or talking points in the game that maybe some of the Limerick forwards who were given an opportunity, I think Pat Ryan, David Reedy, Cathal O'Neill, didn't really fire, and maybe put some pressure for later on in the year where they might get to feature a little more.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the most interesting aspects. I suppose with a team that's dominating there, you nearly even build up the reserves maybe to be a bit better than they are. Like say Pat Ryan and a couple of these lads, they're generally coming into a game when it's opened up in the 60th minute or the 65th minute. There's more space. Other teams are probably, physically and emotionally and mentally nearly beaten when they're coming into a game. Whereas a lot of new faces were starting yesterday. You'd probably say that there wasn't too many that stood up and took their chance. And I definitely think it gave the Chasing Pack an awful lot of hope that, okay, they're a brilliant side, the best side that's out there at the moment, but they're far from invincible. And these guys that are coming in, maybe when they get their chance, they're maybe not as good as we build them up to be in our heads. That's just coming from an opposition point of view and from a spectator point of view. But just even like the 11 points, I was in Leopardstown yesterday following the race, and I was just following this game and literally refreshing Twitter or refreshing TG Carter to make sure that the score was actually right. Limerick typically create about 25 or 26 scoring chances per half. For them to only score 11 points, I think Eamon Sweeney had it today when Tipperary beat them 224 to 8 points in March of 2010. That's the last time they scored anything as small as what they did yesterday. And that was just very, very surprising. And particularly, it looked like Limerick were going to kick on when they went 11-9 up. Garrod Hegarty got a good score. And then all of a sudden, Mikey Dwyer, steps and all, just John, I don't know how many steps you used to get away with, a fair few steps back in the day, but I don't know if you ever got away with 15. But he was kind of half been fouled, so the referee kind of gives you a bit of grace. But that goal just turned the game on its head. And then Conor McDonald, just an outrageous catch down around his midriff and over the shoulder point. And I don't think anybody really saw this coming. Wexford are down, Lee Chin at the moment, down Sean Murphy, down a couple of other experienced players, Kevin Foley as well. And for them to produce that result, it's huge. And it's kind of reminiscent of Davies' first couple of games as Wexford boss in 2017. They got a couple of big league results. Beating Limerick was one of them, actually, during John Kiley's first year. And that's a huge, huge feather in the cap of Darragh Egan.
Yeah, and look, for me, I think yes, to be fair to Wexford, just before that goal came, they had a period of dominance, and I was kind of saying to myself, are they going to rue those missed opportunities? But no, thankfully they didn't. They kicked on, and they got their just rewards. And the worrying thing for Kiley, as Verney touched on it there, is Peter Casey's going to be missing. There wasn't a whole lot of lads, put their hand up yesterday to say, what, I want to be in that Limerick team. And I think we all know that Limerick 1-15 are the best team, but I think there is a small bit of question marks. Look, it's early doors. It's the first game in first game of the league. We're in the month of February, but I think possibly we read a small bit too much into the Clare result, and I think the worrying thing for Limerick is that if Peter Casey's out, where are the other lads that are going to put their hand up and say, what, I want to be in your team.
Well, it's certainly the result makes for a more interesting discussion than if Limerick had maybe come out in the first game and blown Wexford away. But looking at one of the other games, big games of the weekend, John, I know you're very interested to see how Dublin would go in the league. Your own county, Waterford, were their opponents in Parnell Park. A very tight game. I think, as Vincent Hogan said, there was more cards than a Las Vegas poker tournament. I think 12 yellows, 2 blacks, and 2 reds. Kind of summed up. It was a fairly physical game. What did you make of it?
Again, it was a game where you're lying on the couch and you're saying, God, it's a great place to be on the couch. And, it was typical, February game. Look, Parnell Park, it's a tight, confined field, and, some of these players now, they're ferocious, they're species, they're just busting out of the jerseys. And I think, we're so accustomed now to so many rucks. And, there was an awful lot of stop-start. And look, to be fair to the referee, this time of year, it's a difficult match to referee. That was the same down in Wexford Park. And look, I think from a manager's point of view, Liam Cahill and Matty Kenny, I think they'll be delighted that they came out of that game yesterday with a draw. I thought Owen O'Donnell, Will Verney, if there was a transfer market, if you gave me a pot of gold in the morning and you said, well, one player you can sign, I'm running out of superlatives to talk with this lad, I'd pick Owen O'Donnell. I thought he was just immense yesterday. I thought Prunty was very good. And again, I think both these sides, if any teams want to possibly push on and win the league, I think, Liam Cahill has stated that he's eager to get to a semi-final, and likewise Matty Kenny. I think both these teams will go after the league, and I think I won't be surprised if Waterford push on and win their next 4 games, top the group. And I don't see too many teams, the remainder of the games getting it all too easy against Dublin either. I think the Dubs. I'm going to be consistent on this. I think they're going to have a big year. Question I'd like to ask Verney is, the lads were touching on it last night on the League Sunday. Is Matty Kenny going to be under pressure? I thought it was a bit harsh. I think he's doing a reasonably good job. And I think, what would be considered a good year for Dublin? Would it be getting to an All-Ireland semi-final? Would it be getting to a Leinster final? Is the bit of realism there now that they have to push on and win a Leinster title? So what would be the realistic target for Dublin this year, Verney?
Yeah, I don't see Matty being under that much pressure, to be honest with you, because I think he kind of started a rebuilding process. And if you look at last year, did a big win against Galway in the championship. Obviously, could have won a Leinster title had they not been hit by COVID on the eve of the final. Were decent against Cork. I think they've a better squad again this year. In Donald Burke and Ronan Hayes, they have 2 real kind of marquee forwards that you can kind of pitch your tent up with going into a championship game. These guys are going to put in kind of big scores. I think probably winning a Leinster, John, and getting to an All-Ireland semi-final is probably potentially, getting to a league semi-final / final, winning Leinster, getting to an All-Ireland semi-final. I think that's probably where they'll be aiming for this year. If you look at Henry's coming in Galway and there's lots of optimism around him. They've had the strong hand over Galway the last couple of years. Kilkenny are going to be Kilkenny, but they're not going to blow you away, and Dublin have been very competitive with them. So I think silverware, and I think probably getting their hands on the Bob O'Keefe again would be definitely suffice for Matty. But I don't see him being under massive pressure, to be honest with you, because I do think if you look at it logically, you think he started here and all of a sudden he's got to here and they're still climbing and the trajectory is still on the up.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they develop over the course of the season. And for Waterford, John, I suppose you have to be happy when you have the Ballygunner contingent still to come back. You know, key guys like Jamie Barnes still to come back and still to get a result like that and to kind of show that fighting spirit.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I think, you know, you look at the panel depth, you know, we've touched on it there. I think Limerick have the best 14, 15 players. We all know that. But when it comes to panel depth, you know, maybe Limerick don't have the best panel, you know, and I think maybe possibly Cork, most certainly Watford. I mean, the strength of their panel, you know, I mean, the changes that they made yesterday. And I think Liam Callaghan, he can go and attack this league and he can find out a bit more about his panel. And I think that's what he will do for the remainder of the games, with a view to winning all the games. But he can really, really test his panel and see can he unearth a couple of new players. I thought Rock Daly went toe-to-toe with Chris Crummy. I was delighted with his performance. Tom Barron really showed up well. He's really starting to come of age. Good to see DJ Foran back. So, you know, when you go through all these names, you know, when you think of it, like there's no De Burke, there's no Shane McNulty, there's no Darrell Lyons, you know, none of the Ballygunner players. I think it's good times for Waterford. It's a good time to be Waterford manager. And I think that, you know, there's exciting times ahead, and I think there's no reason why they can't push on in this league and really go for this league and try and win.
John, just a quick one on Jack Fagan. Jack Fagan was wing back yesterday. Is that something you see happening or staying kind of that way long term? And what do you think the idea of it is?
I don't. You know, I think possibly yesterday it was probably a view to possibly playing him wing back, with him maybe going, you know, toe-to-toe aerial with Danny Sutcliffe. Now, as it happens, he wasn't marking Danny Sutcliffe. Tom Barron was marking Danny Sutcliffe. But no, I would see maybe they were playing him there yesterday, wing back, you know, kind of, you know, getting him into the mindset of playing kind of an auxiliary kind of wing forward. He's kind of playing that role anyway, kind of getting him into the mindset of coming back, going forward. But most certainly, I don't see, you know, when the likes of De Burke, Ian Kenny, and a couple more of the stronger guys come back, I don't see him being wing back. I see him being pushed up and, you know, pushing up to his natural wing forward position.
Michael, one thing I'd like to get your opinion on, and someone we actually didn't touch on in our league preview last week, is Tipperary. They had a pretty narrow win over Laois in the end, but obviously the news last week that Pádraig Mars had to retire after picking up a neck injury kind of adds to the sense of, you know, transition that Colin Bonner is facing this year in his first season in charge. Like, where do you think they're at the moment? Like, is there guys coming through from those underage winning teams, you know, 20 and 21 All-Irelands that they, you know, banked over the last couple of years to kind of add to that experienced core, some of whom are still there?
There's plenty of guys coming through. They obviously won the 21 in 2018, kind of against the grain, and they won the 29 fairly comprehensive, or in 2019 they won the under 20 fairly comprehensively. But if you look at it over the last 3 years under Liam Sheedy, he generally went with the older heads, and a lot of those younger players, like Ger Brown was the under 21 player of the year, I think, in 2018. He wasn't on the squad last year. Mark Keogh's another one of those guys, played, you know, sporadically maybe throughout that time. Jake Morris played a bit as well, but you know, a lot of them are going to be parachuted in now. You would have maybe thought over the last 2 years in particular that they would have maybe got more league time. Paddy Cadell's another one, more league time, more championship time, and they'd be ready to step up as the leaders of the team now. I don't think that process will happen maybe as naturally as people in Tip would like, but they're definitely going to have to step up during the league. They're going to get a lot of time, going to get an awful lot of time. You know, Paddy Matter's absence from the dressing room is going to be huge. Him and Brendan Matter in particular retiring in recent enough months, that's going to be a big void from the dressing room. There's going to be opportunities there for guys to stand up, but it does look like a bit of a a bit of a rebuilding job. They have the good thing for them is that they have the raw materials, maybe unlike some other counties that have had to rebuild in recent years. They definitely have the raw materials to work with, but I think it's going to take time. And I think Colin Bonner would probably be privately happy that they're in Group 1B and will, not be coming up against Limericks or Galways, and will actually give these chance. That's not to say that Watford, Dublin, Kilkenny aren't strong, but it's definitely the weaker of the two groups, and it will give them a chance to experiment a bit more with regards to the summer. But I do think they're down the pecking order a bit at the moment, and Laois really put it up to them the other night. If Paddy Purcell hadn't been sent off, I think they would have been even closer, because they were the ones probably finishing a bit stronger than Tip the other night.
Yeah, John, like for you, are Tipperary still All-Ireland contenders, or as Micah said, is Colin Bonner really in charge of a rebuilding year more so than maybe targeting an All-Ireland title?
Oh, look on any given day, look, they're a traditional county, they're like Kilkenny, they're like Cork. On any given day, I think they can possibly beat anyone. Look, there's still some terrific hurlers. I mean, they're talking Jason Flynn, Noel McGrath, John McGrath. Will Bubbles come back? I think he's coming back from injury. I'd say possibly, Callan probably might play an impact role this year. Jake Morris. I mean, those names are just rolling off my tongue. I think one lad who's is going to be a big loss for him. I was excited by him in the club championship. Was young Connolly playing for a Lockmore Castleknock. I thought he was excellent. From what I can gather, he's going away travelling. I think he would have been a perfect fit for that Tipperary midfield. But look, there's no doubt about it. There is a bit of a rebuild there. Losing Paddy Maher, I mean, God, what a player. What a player. I mean, you talk players, you're talking Tommy Welch's, you're talking Sean O'Halpines, Brian Whelans, he's right up there, and it's Verney touched on it. He's going to be a massive loss out of that dressing room. Himself and Brendan Maher, possibly two of the greatest Tipperary players of all time. They're two big losses, but I think this weekend's fixture, I think Colin Bonner will find out an awful lot more, when the old enemy comes to town, Kilkenny. So I think it's going to be a learning curve throughout the league. As we said, touched on it last week, trying to unearth a few more players, trying to mould the team together. And I think, come the championship, I still think they're going to be a match for anyone. You can never rule them out, no.
Just on that, Will, as well, you have to remember as well, but I've probably talked them down a bit. They were the only team to put it up to Limerick last year and had Limerick totally on the ropes and were 10 up at half time. And the 5 points they were beaten by was the closest anyone got to Limerick in last year's championship. So, on a given day, as John says, they do have the talent, but there's a lot of kind of change going to have to happen, and maybe the process maybe hasn't been as natural maybe as some people in Tipperary would have liked. They probably would have liked some of the younger guys to be blooded a bit sooner.
Yeah, and Michael, what about Henry Shefflin's league debut as Galway manager against your own county, Offaly, winning pretty comfortably in the end? I think Michael Fennelly was stressing the positives afterwards. But what did you make of that? Obviously, big step up for Offaly.
This was very, very, very comprehensive from Galway. Just from chatting to a few people that were at the game. Obviously, I saw the highlights last night, but they could have had 8 to 10 goals. That was the way the game was. They were like, if you look at Gerard McInerney's goal, he picked up the ball in his own 45, I think, and he ran the whole way down the centre of the pitch. It was like the Red Sea was after opening up for him. It was crazy. From an Offaly point of view, definitely not the start that we would have wanted, and probably shows. I know Michael Fennelly was saying, and he's right to say it, because it's just the way it is. You're coming from third tier of championship, which is the Christie Ring. Like last year, I think Offaly played. Definitely played Sligo and Derry were 2 of their games in the Christie Ring Championship, and now you're going up and you're playing Galway in Pearse Stadium. Like that's just a massive step up. It's not 1 or 2 steps up, it's 3 or 4 steps up. So they were probably always going to be under pressure a bit, but very comprehensive from Galway. I think the exciting thing from a Galway point of view is if they can get Conor Whelan, Brian Concannon, Evan Nyland, and this new fella, John Fleming from Meath Aircourt, who's been brilliant for NUIG in the Fitzgibbon and was brilliant in the Walsh Cup and was brilliant again the other day when he came in. If they can get them all clicking in attack, it's very, very exciting in the absence of Joe Canning.
I still think, though, you go back to the Watford game. Where did they lose that Watford game? They lost it in the middle third, their slash half back line, midfield, half forward line, where they just didn't have enough energy in there. They didn't have enough runners. And I think for all the forwards they can have, I think what's going to be key for Henry, if he's going to get a kick out of this Galway team this year, he's got to find runners out around that middle third. No disrespect to some of the players there last year. But that's where Waterford absolutely mauled them there in the championship last year. Was out around that middle third. They just didn't have enough legs out around there and didn't have enough energy.
Any of the big teams will eat you if you don't have massive physicality and massive energy out there. So it'd be interesting to see whether Henry will kind of, will implement that. He had Joe Cooney playing there yesterday and he's vice captain as well. So that would suggest he's going to be in around the middle third and you're probably going to need a lot of mobility in around him as well. But that's going to be interesting. But definitely from Henry's point of view, definitely a kind of a statement win to start the league.
Yeah, and a middle third challenge doesn't come much bigger than Limerick, and that's who they face, I think, in the Gaelic grounds next Saturday night, which is probably the game of the weekend. So that'll be one to watch for sure. John, the other two games over the weekend, we had Cork beating Clare pretty comprehensively on Saturday night. Kilkenny then struggling against Antrim as well. Antrim putting up a really good fight against them in Nolan Park. Anything sticking out to you about those two matches?
Yeah, Cork. I think we've got to keep a good eye on Cork this year. It's going to be interesting to see how they react after that defeat in the All-Ireland final last year. And, for me, it was a perfect start from good way to react, great result, everyone on the scoreboard. I think Ciarán Whelan going at full back. I think he can nail down that full back position. I still think they've got to nail down that full back position. And I think he could be the guy that could be the man that could go in and, finally, answer all the question marks that hang over that full-back position. So I think you'll see an awful lot more of him. I think this Kieran Joyce, we've watched him over the last couple of years under 20. We touched on him last night and on the Sunday League. I think he's going to be a massive, massive find for Cork. I think, they have the luxury of, you can play him now in either midfield, you can play him either centre-back, you can play him wing-back. So I think he's going to be a big, big find for Cork. And look, they have the firepower up front to trouble any team. And look, I think again a bit like Waterford, I think they really have a strong panel. You look at the players that came off the bench there Saturday night. Proves that they have 21, 22 players that they can call upon. So look, I think it was a good start for Cork, and I think from here on in, I think Cork should go after the league, try and win a league title. And really, really push on and try and, re-galvanise the whole thing. And I think Cork could have a big say this year. Kilkenny, on the other hand, I think Cody highlighted after the match, he was very, very disappointed in their performance against Antrim. And I think, look, the reality of it is in Kilkenny that, they don't have, the calibre of players that they once have. And when you take the likes of DJ Reid, the Adrian Mullins, the Owen Cody's, the Dara Corcorans, all them Ballyhale lads out of that team, I think there is a tendency that they could struggle in this league campaign, and there might be another couple of results of that where they may struggle.
Well, it's great that the Alliance Hurling League's back up and running, and there's going to be plenty to look forward to over the next few weeks. But for now, John, Michael, thanks so much for joining me.
Cheers, mate.
That's all we have time from the Tyrone this week in association with Alliance. We'll be back next week to reflect on all the league action. And in the meantime, you can subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or listen on independent.ie. So until next time, thanks for listening and goodbye.
It's only 30 years of Alliance supporting the leagues, and we're not done yet. Only the leagues, only the Alliance leagues.